It's the savvy side of 9 to 5. Listen.
Bueller.
Laugh. And learn.
Negotiation. This is what you do in business.
This is The Focus Group with Tim Bennett.
Staunch.
And John Nash.
Keep your clothes looking neat and clean.
We're all business. Except when we're not.
Barely picture.
Welcome to The Focus Group. John Nash here with my good friend and co-host, Mr. Tim Bennett.
Now it doesn't read pink, does it?
Yeah, Tim's wearing what he thinks is a pink shirt. I call it salmon. Salmon.
I think it's pink. It is pink.
I don't know, guys. What do you think? We have John on video. We have Garrett on audio in the booth. The boys in the booth.
Looks white on camera.
Doesn't it look white on camera?
Yeah.
It does.
But not a bright white, which would be bad. So I guess there's a tint of color in there, right?
Ever since Brian wore that yellow a couple weeks ago, and again, Katharine Hepburn told me not to wear any light colors on air, I've been doing it. I don't know, maybe
through the Ouija board because she's dead. But
well, no, she always said don't wear yellow. I got rid of yellow everything.
Hey, focusgroupradio.com is where we want you to go to find out all about the show. The platforms are on. We're live here on Facebook and YouTube from 1 to 2 p.m. on Wednesdays. But you can grab the show anytime you want off of SoundCloud, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts. Used to just be
iTunes.
Well, no, but now they call it Apple Podcasts. And by all means, continue to listen to Unbuttoned, our Tuesday show. We drop that on Tuesdays, usually three to four topics, but we keep it 18 to 20 minutes.
This week was long.
By 2 minutes, I think, right? 3?
Maybe.
It wasn't so bad, but yeah, that's Unbuttoned. So thanks for joining us. If you want to join the conversation, by all means, call us at 877-962-6846, and you'll have Garrett answer the phone, and he'll patch you through if it's something we want to talk about. So, Mr. Bennett, we are now officially in what I guess is the dog days of summer. I thought dog days of summer were July, but July was kind of mild compared to this latest well, not by you, but by us, the heat wave is...
Well, other than... I can always tell by the train station, because other than the housefraus that are coming up for the Wednesday matinees in Manhattan...
Everybody's gone.
Parking lots are pretty empty.
Cleared out. August is... when we were in marketing and advertising proper, not doing our consulting, or when I had my agency and you were at a company, we all knew August was the month to take off. This is when you planned your vacation because everybody else was gone. Nothing got done.
Well, I was wondering, the Europeans, what they do that 6 week in the summer?
6 week.
I was wondering if we were going to go more that way. Because we've all noticed, particularly if you're in corporate America, there is a lull between Thanksgiving and
Christmas
and the end of the year, right?
New Year's, right?
And then now the other lull seems to always be in August, and whether it's people getting ready to go back to school or it's the last time the family can do something together before the kids go to school or school starts up again. So
today we have another one of Tim's favorite shows, and that's the guest list show. And I loved our last week's show because
and you always yell at me for liking a guest list show.
Well, I like.
What did I tell you back in the day when you would turn on the radio and you would listen to one of the shows on our other platform? You tuned in to hear the hosts talk.
Yeah, I did.
And a lot of times, if they had a guest on you didn't like, or they had a topic you weren't interested in, you turned it off.
Yeah, it's true.
So I see nothing wrong with that.
So today, though, we're going to tackle. I called it the business
roundup.
The business roundup. So we have a bunch of articles and topics.
Right? Was it all business?
Mostly. Well, a lot of it is. One article we liked was the middle class is being wiped out. No surprise there. This one is a perennial favorite of mine. How gay should the gay bar be nowadays? Right. People over 40 should only work 3 days a week. I like that idea. Franklin. One of the peanuts was, and an eco-friendly footwear startup is turning plastic bottles into cool shoes. So that's a business roundup. There you go.
I'm going to ask you about those shoes.
I've seen them in the wild, by the way. I've seen that, the
water bottles?
Not the water bottles, but the shoes that were made from the water bottles. Yeah. So here we are. August is one of those funny little months that I actually tend to like a great deal, except for this humidity. And everybody says the same thing. I wouldn't mind the heat. I don't care if it's 85, but 85 or 87 with, 100% humidity is downright, And
the horrible fires that are going on out west. I saw that.
Yeah.
I was looking at the temperatures. They were doing something this morning. They were doing the national temperatures. and they were talking about it being in the high 90s to like 100 in Portland and Seattle, which when I lived out there 25 years ago was unheard of.
They don't even have air conditioning. Yeah.
Right. So the fact that people deny that there's some sort of something happening with the climate, I think, is just crazy. I don't remember it being this humid as a kid. We didn't have air conditioning in our house. Did you in Connecticut?
Nope. We had box fans.
We had a fan.
And there was always 1 or 2 weeks in the summer, max 3 days, when it was uncomfortable and you had to, you know, sleep a certain way or you take a cold shower before you went to bed. But I don't remember this much of it. And again, this is because of a certain weather pattern that's been set up by, I think, the Bermuda High. Like there's a high off the coast that's stuck, and all this moisture is coming up from the Gulf and feeding into the heat and humidity. So
I thought you were going to blame the Chinese.
Hey, I got to tell you, from our apartment yesterday, let's go back to blaming you. It would be so easy to blame the Chinese, right? Let's just blame the Chinese, blame Twitter. I was looking at our living room window last night, and there was a wall of black clouds, like a storm came in, but it seemed to be over, I guess, like Queens, I guess. And and Bob comes home from work, and I said, get a load of this storm. And as we look, like multiple bolts of lightning are coming down. Well, come to pass that when we turn on the evening news is all about these lightning strikes in Queens, one of which actually I think might have killed somebody. A lightning strike. I don't often hear about lightning striking people, but it does happen. So these guys are having a pickup game of soccer somewhere out by the not far from LaGuardia, I guess where the Old World's Fair was, this park. And it starts to rain, and it gets really bad, and they're running for shelter. And then one guy turns around, and 2 people that were literally behind him are just laying flat out. One, I think, was not moving, and that's the one I think might have actually died, and the other one I think might have been resuscitated. But you can survive a lightning strike. But my God, I mean, when you saw these bolts, they weren't like little tiny.
Should have gone inside.
Bennett should have gone inside.
I mean, as soon as I heard the thunder rumbling, my dogs were out. I brought them in right away.
Yeah.
You know, you don't go outside with the lightning. You know that. Would you be running around a field?
No. Last time I was on my bike and I was trapped in a storm like that, I immediately look for some kind of overpass, bridge just to stand under or something, because at least you're under concrete, right?
By the way, I ordered you $2 bills.
Yay. All right, so, this is our favorite bill. This is our favorite bill, and the currency is a $2 bill.
Right? I think in June of next year, we're going to do a big campaign around using the 2 during Pride weekend. Let people know about money. But so I went to the bank, and I wanted to order the $2 bills. And, it's a hassle. I had to fill out a form, da-da-da-da-da. So the 2s are in. So I'll get you your 2s. But Richard is afraid he won't go with me to the store when I use them. I'll count them out 2, 4, 6. He gets very upset.
Oh, I'm dying. I am dying to do that exact same thing.
Wait till you see how often the manager gets called over to see if they could take the money or what it is, because it's usually some young kid behind the counter looks at this thing like, what is it? And then I think I might have ordered them before, because there's a store near the bank that was giving change out in 2s, and it caused all kinds of commotion. No one wanted the money. And so then I came through. I said, I'll take it all. So the woman had like $20, $26 worth of 2s in her cash drawer. So I don't know if somebody came in and paid or they just had them, but people were just like, what's this? What's this?
Yeah.
$2 bill. I don't want that.
I don't know why people are like, it's just currency.
You boys use $2 bills?
I don't use them. I have like $50 worth folded up in some.
Why?
Someone paid off a bet with them, and I just still have them.
Why don't you use them?
They're all brand new and fresh.
Yes, use them. We'll buy them off you. Bring them in. We'll pay you.
All right.
Oh, there you go. Look at this.
Yeah, I don't know why I'm not using. It's more like I don't want to be like, here you go, and someone gets confused, and like kind of what you're saying.
The best thing is you get something that's $1.89. You just hand the one bill, and they keep waiting, and I'm like, I'm waiting for my change.
Yeah. That's what I want to do. I want to do the small purchase.
Yeah.
That requires.
It's $3.
Just the one bill to go. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. $3.75. Can I have
2, 4?
There you go. Boom.
Oh! And they do that. Oh, can I use this? Can I take this? And usually, it's got to be the older person in the store that comes over to say yes. That's.
I'm very glad these are right. Now, are these fresh new bills?
These are all new bills.
So that's how you have to get them. You have to order them.
I had to order them. Because you go to the bank. I ask for them every time I go to the bank. They know me, the $2 bill guy. So I go into the bank, and they'll have them save. They might say, we've got $12 worth, or we've got, some little kid came in with his piggy bank. His grandma had given him twos. There's $6 worth or something. So I buy whatever they have. But when you want volume, you got to order them.
When you want volume. Okay, well, look, I'm thrilled because the last $2 bill I got was given to me by our next door neighbor's daughter, Olivia, and because Mary knew that we had this thing with the bills, and Olivia, I remember she came over, she hands me the bin, she opens it, she said, look, it's a 2. Like it's like a found in the wild, it's a $2 bill.
Well, I want to have the guy on there's a guy that's was in charge of the latest $2 bill, and I met him down in Rehoboth, Mark. And I asked him if he could come on the show and talk about it, but I think because he works for the Fed, there's got to be lots of clearances.
There's all this, yeah.
But I thought it would be fun to have him come on and talk about the currency in general, because he says that they really want to move away from paper money per se, particularly with the dollar bill.
You said it was going to be a coin. They want to replace it.
They want to go back to a coin again. Most countries use a coin for $1.
Yeah, it annoys me when I'm traveling abroad.
But it's heavy, because, imagine if you had 10 coins, you're clink,
10
clink,
coins.
Clink, clink. It's heavy.
But I know where they're going. I know where the Treasury's going with this. It's expensive. The bills have there's special paper. There's things built into them to prevent forgery. They also launder the money at some point, don't they? Have you heard about this? When bills bills that aren't quite dead get laundered and they get recycled and put into the money stream. That's crazy stuff, right?
No, I think it's interesting, and I think the counterfeit thing, the biggest counterfeit thing are some of these third world countries, particularly North Korea was famous for it, just printing hundreds and throwing them in circulation.
I have talked about, maybe I haven't talked about it. No, you and I did talk about this one time. If I were a counterfeiter, I would not counterfeit the 100. I'd go for like the most common bills. I'd do like a 5, a 10, or a 20. Now, of course, you have to counterfeit a lot at that point.
Yeah.
But those are the ones that no one would even think about. Right?
An eyelash, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's a 5.
Particularly a single.
Yeah, well, a single, yeah.
How many times have you given ripped money that you taped?
But I gave you a 3.
I have a friend who used to go to the strip clubs, and he would rip the ones in half and then fold them, so he would get 2 tucks for $1 instead of the.
That is so low rent.
Well, he said at the end of the night they're still going to have the 2 halves. You got to tape them together.
Do you know the last time you gave me a $2 bill?
We were at the Abbey.
You remember exactly. And what did I do with it?
You immediately went over and
one of the Go-Go Boys. And the Go-Go Boy
was excited.
Was
get a 2.
Super polite, very friendly, big smile on his face. He goes, the 2 is actually their favorite. That means, He
said that's their lucky bill or something.
That's their lucky bill. And he takes my hand and he puts his hand on my hand on his chest. And I was like,
I've never seen you so excited in my life when I gave you those 2s for you to divvy out. You like doing that.
The Go-Go Boys. I love Go-Go Boys. I don't know
What's Bob think of that?
Not a thing. He laughs his ass off. It's just like, oh, John. There goes John. I think it's almost like watching a kid play with a squirt gun. It's like, oh, there he goes.
Oh, you're talking them up and everything else. They just want the money, John. They don't want you to.
They're dancing in their combat boots.
Is this your full-time job?
What's your dream? What do you want to do when you're 13? Did you think you'd be stomping on a platform in a pair of combat boots and a jockstrap?
At the Abbey?
Oh, there. At the Abbey in Los Angeles. Well, that part.
How was it tonight?
All right, enough of this. What caught your eye?
What caught your eye? Here's what Tim and John found.
So this, as John reminded me when he checked the notes out. So John had done a story about a year ago about what was going on with China with recycling of these bikes for these bike share programs. And so particularly in China, they had a real problem with everybody getting into the latest get-rich-quick scheme. So all these companies started getting into the next big thing and doing bike share programs. So in China, because of the sheer volume of people, instead of hundreds of bikes or thousands of bikes, you're talking tens of thousands of bikes. So there are some pictures here, if you're watching along with our video, of some of the graveyards of Chinese
This
bikes.
One is Dallas.
This one's Dallas. So it's come to the U.S.
I'm shocked by this.
So this had caught my eye. The headline was "Mountain of Rideshare Bikes Left at a Dallas Recycling Center After the Company Leaves the City." So this is a Chinese bike share company called OFO, and they're known for their yellow bikes. And so they opened up in Dallas, and they decided to leave because Dallas had been overrun by a lot of these bike share programs, and so they had slapped on some additional fees in order to operate in the city. So the bike sharing operators had to do $808. Why $808? I don't know, but $808 application fee. You have to pay $21 per bike
to drop
register.
Those off?
No, to register the bike. This is just to do the bike share in the city.
Got it.
And then, so in this case, the OFO brought in 5,000 bikes, which was $105,000 and change.
Wow.
So they said, forget it, we don't want to do it. So instead of shipping the bikes back to China or giving them to either needy places or kids or police departments, whatever you would do with workable bikes, they just dumped them at the recycling center. So there they are there. And they said many of them were still in very good shape. Some of them were not, but it overwhelmed this recycling center. So similar to that, and then if you go through some of the other pictures, they show what's happened in China by all these companies that either decided to do bikes that didn't necessarily hold up.
In other words, mechanically.
So the bikes, they just made cheap bikes to get them on the streets, but tires went or brakes broke or whatever. So this here, all these pictures in China of these graveyards of bikes.
That's a crime.
And they said it's going to take them years to figure out what to do with these because you just can't recycle the whole thing. You have to take the rubber tires off and the cables.
You have to process the bike. You actually have to take each one of the, oh my God, it's...
Initially, I thought that was the Golden Gate Bridge, but that's a bridge in China. So Dallas says, as this story was going on and I read further, one of the other things that's happened is Seattle has a dockless bike sharing program. So here in Manhattan and a bunch of other cities in Philadelphia,
you dock the bike.
You dock the bike. So you have the app or whatever. You get a bike, you ride it to the next place, you dock it. Well, the latest thing are these dockless bikes.
Leave it anywhere.
So you just leave it anywhere, and then you find it
That's a recipe for trouble.
So, of course, the city of Seattle is having the biggest issue of all the cities that are doing this now with these dockless bike share programs. But China 3 years earlier had a problem with this. They said tens of thousands of broken and stranded bikes littered cities before the governments finally cracked down and impounded the bikes and set limits on their use. So Seattle, seeing what happened in China, as we saw with those pictures, decided to do the same thing, and they limited it to 4,000 bikes. So 3 companies came in, OFO, which were those yellow bikes, Lime Bike, and Spin, and they did a 6-month trial in Seattle. And while the Seattle people liked it, generally the sudden arrival of, they said, tens of thousands of bikes didn't sit well with everyone. They said that inevitably there was conflict with the residents of Seattle and the transportation department. Car owners are blaming the bikes for scraping their vehicles. Residents are peeved that unsightly bikes are just left everywhere, clogging up sidewalks, parks, and driveways, and in some cases just being left in the middle of the street. And they said, so now vandals are going on and cutting the brakes of these bikes.
The cables.
So the bikes are rendered useless.
And in Seattle, when you discover a cable's been snipped and you're going down a hill, that could be a bit problematic.
So the biggest issue now is a lot of them are ending up in the bay or the ocean or the water or the lakes. People are throwing them into the water. So there's a scuba company that said ever since this bike share program started, now when they go to do scuba lessons, they're finding bikes in there. So instead of the bike companies was to fish them out, they've now hired scuba divers to go in and pull these bikes out of the lakes and the bays in Seattle to get them back on the street running.
Who's paying for this? The municipality?
No, the bike companies are, because the people are mad and they're throwing the bikes in the water.
Talk about unintended consequence, unintended cost, right? Look, here in New York, we have the City Bike thing. Who sponsors your bikes in Philly?
It's Independence Blue Cross, the healthcare company.
So here we have City Bike, the City Bike program, and
Is it a bank?
Yeah, Citibank, and it's a bank. And here, routinely, neighborhood community boards have very hotly contested meetings, screaming matches, because I read a statistic the other day in the New York Times that this bike sharing program on all these racks have deprived the city of close to 10,000 parking spots. Now, not everybody can afford...
That's why they're booting every car with a ticket, probably.
Not everybody can afford a garage. There's not enough garage capacity to begin with. If the city had 4 centralized garages with multiple levels, maybe you could do this. So residents don't want this stuff on their block. They don't want the thing parked there.
They take up a lot of space.
And we had one across from our old apartment building, and at 2 in the morning, the truck comes by to steam clean or pressure clean the bike rack. Brrr, it makes that noise. At 2 in the morning, you're like, really? For the city bikes?
Have you used any? Did you ever use one?
I hate them.
No, did you use one?
Yeah, I've used one once.
They have multiple speeds? just one speed?
I don't remember, actually. Garrett says one. Yeah,
Yeah,
You
just
boys
one.
use the bikes?
yeah, it's just one. And they're heavy.
My friend used to. That was it. I never. Yeah, they seem heavy, and
Did he like it? Convenient or what?
I guess so because he would come into Grand Central and have to go down to 23rd Street for work. So he would pick up a bike there instead of paying for the subway.
Yeah,
do
you know,
that.
and think about bike share, like doing a bike on today.
Yeah.
Like it's barely 90, but the heat index is up near 100 because of the humidity. Who wants to show up dripping wet? I mean, you do anyway off the train, I guess, on a day like today. But you know, my regular bike is about a third of the weight of one of these things, and it's a
different deal.
racing bike. Well, anyway, I'm not a big fan of the. Everybody, since I love cycling, a lot of people are like, don't you love that? I'm like, no.
I usually see people all over the streets, and I'm not really knowing how to ride a bike hitting curbs.
The last time I ever had a thought of riding a city bike, it was dashed when I saw a guy going down this block, one hand on the thing, phone tucked in his right here, holding a bagel in one hand, and the hand on the handlebar had a cup of coffee. I'm like, what is this? But you're one pothole away from a broken hand. I would have actually, hate to say this, Schadenfreude moment. I would have loved to have seen the fall off the bike.
You needed a burqa or a hijab, or is that what they call it, the hijab? I always see the women walking around with the cell phone stuck in it.
All right.
You don't even need your hands free.
Mine, of course, that's what we love about Caught Our Eye. It's totally different. Mine is very different. A study researched which types of readers make the best partners in terms of romance and love, and it turns out that sci-fi and fantasy readers make better lovers, according to a new study published by researchers at the University of Oklahoma.
Fake news.
The new research shows that sci-fi and fantasy readers have more mature beliefs and romantic relationships than readers who gravitate towards suspense, romance, or even highbrow literature. So they go
self-serving.
I'm a sci-fi and fantasy fan, so
don't you think this is fake news, boys? Garrett will agree with me.
Totally.
I don't know. I agree with it.
Thank you, John.
I can see that. Makes sense
now
to
and
me,
then you
John.
have your Spock T-shirt on, and I appreciate that. And that means that John and I are in the, as usual, Garrett and Tim.
So wait a minute. Why
John.
do they make better lovers?
The study analyzed the reading habits and relationship responses from 404 adult participants in English-speaking countries. They were given a test, and they were looking at 15 authors in each of 7 literary genres: classic, contemporary, literary fiction, fantasy, horror, sci-fi, as well as 45 additional fake names, which would weed out non-readers who wanted to appear smart by recognizing every name on the list. Ringers, right? Research subjects also took tests to determine how much they relied on others in relationships, where they scored on the big 5 personality traits: agreeableness, conscientiousness, extroversion, neuroticism, and openness. These are like 5 big buckets that people tend to gravitate to, and how they felt about a number of negative relationship beliefs, such as when couples disagree, it seems like the relationship is falling apart, and people who have a close relationship can sense each other's needs as if they could read each other's minds. Their findings were somewhat surprising, although researchers discovered that those who read classics were less likely to believe that a disagreement is destructive in a relationship. Sci-fi and fantasy readers went several steps further. Not only did fans of those genres not believe that disagreement would destroy a relationship, so they had a very broader expanse thought process, aka 1 or 2 fights, nothing's wrong here, it's just the relationship. Whereas other people are like, uh-oh, something's wrong. But they were also less likely to support belief that partners cannot change. So sci-fi and fantasy readers also believe that their partner is capable of change if you brought something up to their attention.
If you think you could fly to the moon in a second, yeah.
If you think you can fly to the moon in a second, well,
anything's possible.
And then the cup comes up.
Anything's possible.
And the cup comes up. There's a whole bunch of behaviors, folks. If you're watching on the video, you don't get this on audio. You might want to start watching, and if you think you fly to the moon in a second, then the cup comes.
Everything's possible. My relationship will change. It's all unicorns and
rainbows and stars. Yeah, so
yeah,
it's not too much of a stretch to say that sci-fi and fantasy readers who are accustomed to stretching their imagination in the books they read might make better lovers than those who read other types of fiction.
Might make. Oh, so it's the wrong headline then.
No. This is a quote from somebody. It's not too much of a stretch.
What's the source of this? Was this Scientific America or
this
Popular
came from
Science?
NPR.
Oh, NPR.
There, the cup comes up again. Then PR.
You listen to NPR anymore?
I do sometimes. You know that I love a lot of what they do, but there's a formula to almost all the shows, and I get tired of the formula after a while. You know, like we're going to take a little break, and we come right back. And
it's like C-SPAN with a line of Coke. I mean, it's kind of it's NPR. It's just one notch.
Okay, so that's what caught our eye.
All right. Business birthday.
Everyone does celebrity birthday greetings, but the Focus Group is the only show in the universe that celebrates business birthdays.
Happy birthday, Alex Schoenbaum. Was born August 8th, 1915. He died in 96 at 81 years old. He was an American collegiate football player from Ohio State. I don't know why they kept pushing that. He must have been okay. He must have been pretty good. But after he was done with his career in football, he was a businessman and particularly in the hospitality industry. He operated a chain of restaurants and motels, best remembering for developing the Shoney's restaurant chain in the southeastern U.S. and also was one of the original franchisees of Big Boy locations.
I remember the Big Boy.
The Big Boy.
Don't see many of them around these days, and I don't remember Shoney. I know the name Shoney's.
Well, Shoney was big in the southeastern U.S. So they said following his career, he founded Shoney's restaurant chain, a regional organization, which was the largest business ever to have originated in West Virginia at the time, and one of the largest family-owned restaurant chains in the U.S. He opened the very first location in Charleston, West Virginia, at a place called a Parquet, which was like a drive-in. And then he obtained the regional marketing rights for the Big Boy trademark, and he renamed the Parquet a Shoney's. And then he teamed up with another franchisee, Raymond Daner, and they merged the companies and called it Shoney's Big Boy. They ended up, their contract with Big Boy had expired, and then they just changed everything to Shoney's. And he also developed these other restaurants. I only was familiar with one of them, Captain D's, which was a fast food seafood restaurant. When I was
a precursor to Long John Silver's or something.
Very similar to that. When I went to college out at Marietta, Ohio, which is near the West Virginia border, there was a Captain D's, and it was seafood. You're right. It's like a Long John Silver sort of thing. Yeah. But just very regional. And then Lee's Famous Recipe Chicken, which I've never heard of. Mrs. Winter's, which was also a casual dining restaurant. The Sailmaker, Pargo's, and the Fifth Quarter Steakhouse.
Wait, one of them was Mrs. Winters?
Mrs. Winters.
Mrs. Winners, like that
was a casual dining.
W-I-N-N?
W-I-N-N-E-R-S.
Mrs. Winners.
Mrs. Winners, the Fifth Quarter Steakhouse. These were all in the southeastern part of the U.S.
That sounds like a restaurant where someone comes out with a wooden spoon and wraps your knuckles.
There it is, Mrs. Winners, chicken and biscuits.
Yeah, you better like my biscuits than someone comes out in a costume.
I mean, I don't know if that's. I don't know what it says on the billboard there. Drive-through, try our 8-piece, 10-piece.
Yeah, buy our 10-piece meal, $14.99.
Yeah.
Buy 8 or something like. Oh boy.
So anyway, after 50 years, he also started some hotels.
I don't want to go to Mrs. Winters, but
no.
The
cool thing about them is after he died and then his wife Betty, they gave an awful lot of their money to philanthropic causes, and particularly in the West Virginia area, which, as we know, is
economically a little struggling.
That's a nice way of putting it, John. I was going to say Appalachia or something.
Say they struggle. I like that. Yeah.
Not that this matters also, but they did talk about it, that it was also somewhat rare because they were Jewish for the location in West Virginia as well. So
makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, so anyway, that was his birthday. And I always wonder about these things because they had a very successful life, but a very regional.
And is Big Boy still around at all?
I don't believe so. They said that the trademark had expired.
Okay.
And so Tim, I think you can find a T-shirt or something.
I actually think you're right. Remember one time you alerted me to this auction that they were doing, and it was all trademarks that were about to expire.
Right.
One of them was
the one we wanted?
TDK. One of them was TDK for the old tape company.
There was one we really wanted, though.
Yes, and I don't remember what it was now. It was a toy, and but I remember going on the homepage, and I bet Big Boy was on there because if you don't use your trademark and you let it lapse, it's going to eventually go to auction.
Well, I think the T-shirt, I think the image of the kid. I mean, it would be.
And the burger up would be not only would be retro cool, but it could also be new or a new discovery for someone now.
Yeah.
All right. As many of you know, Deep Discount is a friend of the Focus Group. Visit deep discount by going to focusgroupradio.com, clicking on their logo. It's the shark. Arr! And start shopping. And before we get into deep discount, we want to wish someone who's responsible for deep discount getting things done on certain ends, on the marketing end. We want to wish John, a big fan of ours and a big fan of deep discount, a happy 70th birthday.
You want to say how old? You already did, 70.
That's a great milestone.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
It's a new 50.
Now, John is a big fan of film, and he has very specific likes, and he actually turned me on to a film called The Quiet American, which I talked about months ago. Brendan Fraser and Sir Michael Caine. The film for me worked on two different levels. It was about pre-Vietnam War, like right before the Americans got involved, and then the other side of it was this interesting love triangle between a younger man, a woman, and a younger man and an older man, and I thought that was an interesting dynamic. But anyway, happy birthday, John!
Happy birthday, John, in California, and I hope that you're staying cool and you're not near the fires.
Not near the fires. All right, so Deep Discount has given us for the month of August a special code for all of you to use. It's FG15. It's a one-time use-only code for everything on Deep Discount's site except game consoles and accessories, and it cannot be used with other coupons, but if you shop enough, you'll probably get free shipping as well. So remember, it's FG15. The sale we'd like to profile, and they Deep Discount, our friends always send us a list of the sales they're running, and they have great sales every month. But the sale that we focused on was documentaries and special interest movies. So we did that for a specific reason. But first up, my pick.
I want to do this topic next week, too, because I had a couple others.
Did you really?
Yeah.
There's so many in the category, right? I mean, I was clicking through, and I was like, I do this. I chose one that I just recently saw, actually, and it's called For the Love of Spock. Deep Discount has it for $10.98. It's done by Adam Nimoy, the son of Leonard Nimoy, who played Mr. Spock, and it's an interesting documentary about the actor and the character he created. And during the filming of the movie, or the documentary, Leonard Nimoy actually passed away. It was in 2015, February of 2015. And Adam Nimoy stopped working on the film for a little bit and then decided to retool it as more of an homage or a send-up or a thank you to his father for creating the character of Spock. It's a fascinating movie. It's interesting because these are actors. I mean, Spock is Spock, right? But the guy who portrayed him had a career in acting. He used to be in Mission Impossible for a little while. Totally interesting. Leonard Nimoy was an alcoholic for several years. His son had a substance abuse problem as well. And the New York Times actually put it this way. The film is actually made by the fact that Leonard Nimoy himself has such formidable charisma that he outshines everything else, regardless of all these family problems and everything else. He ended up being an iconic symbol, and come on, he created Spock. I mean, you can't go wrong.
I've never seen a show that was only on 2 seasons get so much traction.
Three seasons.
3 seasons.
John, can you believe that? Can you believe this?
I don't know. It's crazy.
I mean, come on,
Tim.
I think Lost in Space went for 3 or 4.
It's like the Mamas and the Papas. They only were around for 2 years. But
anyway, I recommend this documentary, For the Love of Spock, if you're a fan and you just want to get a little behind the scenes.
Sounds sad.
Look. No, it's hey, every family has their issues, right? And we have to remember, these people are just actors. They created these iconic characters, but they're actors.
Okay.
What'd you pick?
Love of Spock. I picked one that I've talked about before, but I really do feel so strongly about it. And if you go to Focus Group, if you go to our Facebook page, focusgroupradio.com, I posted a clip from the movie.
Okay.
That's going to go up sometime after 3 o'clock East Coast time. And it features Mary Clayton, who was the voice behind the iconic Gimme Shelter and the Rolling Stones song. And so this movie is called 20 Feet from Stardom. And it was originally released in 2013 and then re-released early 2014. But it really goes through anyone who's a fan of any music from the 60s to the 80s that had the very iconic voices behind them and background music.
It was the backup singers.
So they were 20 feet from stardom. And so they interviewed people like Bruce Springsteen, Sting, Mick Jagger, Stevie Wonder, Bette Midler, any mega group from the 60s, 70s, 80s, and they talked to all these background singers and backup singers about how they added to the music. And in some cases how they were treated, in some cases how they weren't. And the story, there's even this Mary Clayton, she even goes on one of the Queen Latifah talk shows and talks about it. But literally the Rolling Stones are recording in in California. It was 1:30 in the morning. Mary Clayton's pregnant and her curler's in bed. And she gets a phone call from her agent saying, you've got to go sing this background. She's like, I'm not doing anything right now.
Yeah. I'm laying in bed. I'm
trying
pregnant.
To explain the Stones were nothing at that point. She said she went in there. She said the lips, the whole deal. I had my curlers. I went in there. I screamed the lyrics. She says, I'm going to blow this place off. I'm going to go to bed. And it became one of the most iconic tracks of all time. So anyway, it's at deep discount at a great price. I think anyone who's a music lover will just love the stories behind the music.
Let me just throw in and say Tim introduced me to this film.
Did you watch it?
We love it. We love it. And one of the most wonderful things about the movie is, in many of the cases, the relationships that these backup singers formed with the bands were really were intertwined. Yeah. And sometimes they would refuse to tour unless someone could tour with them. But there's also another side to this, which was they only made a certain amount of money.
They didn't get paid a lot, but
no,
they made
those songs.
Make or break a song. Yeah.
So again, great recommendation. Thank you for that.
What's the new release?
New release is, okay. I happen to love this series. It's called Documentary Now. Seasons 1 and 2 are now available on Blu-ray. It's the new release from Deep Discount. Saturday Night Live alumni Bill Hader and Fred Armisen co-created this. The first Documentary Now send-up that I saw was their take on Grey Gardens, which is just... I'm laughing. I think they captured a lot of things. And if you know documentaries really well, they basically send up a bunch of different documentaries by kind of recreating it. And it's very funny. I find it to be hysterical.
Reminds me a little bit of the short versions of all those movies, Waiting for Guffman or Best in Show, right?
Yeah, like Best in, like, and that Corky St. Clair. This is the Waiting for Godot action figure. Said, "Oh, you know all the best restaurants." Yeah. Anyway, it's the series has been on IFC for a while, but again, the new release is Documentary Now, seasons 1 and 2 on Blu-ray, 14 episodes, 2 discs. Hilarious. I think
fun thing to have. So head over to focusgroupradio.com, click on the Deep Discount logo, start shopping away. Remember, for the month of August, use the code FG15. We'll also post it on our Facebook page so you can find it and get some additional savings off of already great prices. Good on everything except games and game consoles and accessories. Right, Garrett?
Thanks, Deep Discount.
We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to do a roundup of some news we found. So stay with us. We'll be right back.
Brought to you by Volkswagen. Visit VW.com to learn more. Focus on the savvy side of 9 to 5 with the Focus Group.
Try, really try.
Listen, laugh, and learn with Tim and John.
I never try anything. I just do it.
Welcome back to the Focus Group. John Nash with Tim Bennett. Business Roundup time. We got a bunch of stories we're going to cover that caught our eye and on the business sense. And the first one was a story that Tim brought to my attention, and it's called The Middle Class is Being Wiped Out. There's a new book coming out.
Wah, wah, wah.
Yeah. I should have said before when Tim said, we're going to come back with a business roundup. And they're all downers and downers. Well, the truth. All right, so a new book by the author Alyssa Quart is called Squeezed: Why Our Families Can't Afford America. And in her book, she looks at a couple of different professions. One of the biggest sections that we saw in the article was talking to teachers and professors and how they can't make ends meet. And it's actually kind of sad in a way. And you say to I look at this, and the first thing I say is, politicians scream at the top of their lungs about education and the future and our children, and yet, what one area are we the most impoverished in? On many areas is how we fund education, and it starts with paying these people an appropriate salary to teach your kids, right?
Yeah, that was there was a big takeaway for me. They highlighted this one couple. And they said each of them earned $69,000. So a combined salary of, $138,000,
$140,000, yeah.
Right? But they live out in the San Francisco area, and the average 1,500 square foot starter home costs $680,000 or whatever.
Yeah.
So if you have children, you just compound the costs. And so Barry, the husband, drives an Uber most nights. and just to make ends meet. And so obviously that cuts into whether he could do other things such as grading papers or doing after-school activities or just being with his family. So that was eye-opening to me.
And also the statistic that overrides her entire book, which is that the middle-class life is now 30% more expensive than it was 20 years ago.
Right.
And that's a very key thing. And I bet you if you go back 20 years, and if you looked at the previous 20, I bet it was even more. I bet the cost of being a middle-class individual has been either accelerating or going up. But that one was a shock to me. And the reference that Tim just gave of the two teachers, so he's driving an Uber at night, and he said, what would I rather be doing, driving this car or planning a curriculum for my students? Right. Well, he has to drive it to pay the bills, but the curriculum's just as important, right?
Well, and they talk about the costs, as you mentioned, being, in some cases, daily life costs over the last 20 years, double of what it did 20 years ago. And I underlined education, healthcare, but also childcare costs.
They bring that up as well.
You know, I know that my sister-in-law, when she had two young children, she worked at a bank. And she ended up in Connecticut. She ended up quitting her job at the bank because all she was doing was working to pay for health care, to pay for childcare. She said, I might as well be home with the kids and have, bonding with my children than for me paying X amount of hundreds of dollars each week.
Here's a great example that takes into account what Canadians pay. So the author looked at the notion of childcare in particular and said 50 weeks in a year. People in Montreal pay anywhere from $1,750 to $5,000 per year. It's a whole year. In the United States, that range is $10,400 to $28,900.
Yeah.
That's an insane amount of money.
Yeah.
That's a huge for childcare. And then they looked at professors at the college level, and again, that is being eviscerated by the fact that these people aren't making enough. And she also cited the fact that many universities and higher education institutions are relying on adjunct professors who are only paid by the term and
per class,
and it's not like they have benefits. And so
there's no benefits, and that way you don't have to tenure a professor. So the argument was, she said, that a lot of these adjunct professors are teaching at these universities, so you pay all this extra money or you pay all this money to educate your children, but they're not being taught by professors. I somewhat didn't think that was such a bad thing.
Did you not, really?
Well, because I thought to myself, I had a few adjuncts when I was in college, and they were generally, it'd be, for instance, now if you were an adjunct or I was an adjunct, people that actually have done work and worked in the fields.
That's
and
true.
A lot of professors, and I would get a lot of these kids out of MBA school that never worked a day when I worked at a corporation. They want to do everything by the book or read their little books to figure everything out. And so an adjunct professor that's actually done an ad campaign, for instance, or actually went out and sold a commodity or a product, has a real world experience versus a professor that talks theory. So I did laugh at that a little bit and say, I don't think an adjunct's so bad.
You're right, Tim. When I did my animation program, every mentor, which would be a professor I had, was a professional animator. They were working, and half of the curriculum or half of what they talked about was often on-the-job experience, what you need to know, navigating employment. It's valuable.
Similar to the adjunct thing, though, a lot of corporations I know are doing this, and people complain they're hiring a lot of temp workers that. Yeah. Again, they don't have to pay health care benefits.
They fall under the 1099. They're not full-time.
They don't get any of the benefits.
Lawyers are also, surprisingly,
that one shocked me.
Another profession that are beginning to experience declining wages, sometimes rather drastically. And the profession of being a lawyer in general is now lumped into a bunch of other ones that are all going to be threatened by automation. So apparently, many legal documents can now be scanned by an OCR system or by a computer to look for certain things that used to be done by human beings.
Young lawyers, they would start out, you'd organize, put a packet together. And I mentioned to you at lunch that Ad Age, one of the periodicals we read, talks a lot about this as it relates to marketing, because they said a lot of jobs, people may lose a lot of jobs, entry-level positions, because of automation or software, and they were talking about it within marketing. And my question to you was, do you believe that could happen in marketing?
There are jobs in marketing that I think be programmed. Like they already have programmatic buying,
right?
So you can specify on an ad network who you want to reach and what age and how often you want to do it. But someone still has to create the message.
What I was going to say, so the creative aspect, I don't think a computer can come up with creative. You can't say these 7 things are going to be what attracts a consumer.
Yeah.
There still needs to be a level of intuitive, creative.
Yeah, and the research side as well. Like I don't think a computer can do the research.
It could tabulate the results, maybe.
Yeah, but it can't get the insight. Right. Like a human sitting behind a one-way mirror,
doing a focus group,
listening to a consumer, they can pick out that one little phrase that can help them make the campaign.
And that was the debate of that Ad Age was having is could it
happen?
Could it affect? And I thought, someone has to come up with an idea, right? So
at the end of the article, and by the way, again, the book that she wrote, the woman who we're profiling here was Squeezed, yeah. Why Our Families Can't Afford America. The list of affected professions reads like a broad cross-section of America. White-collar and blue-collar alike. Nurses, pharmacists, journalists, truckers, cashiers, tax preparers. Very few professions will remain unaffected by advances in technology. It's interesting, like when you think about audio, video, a lot of production stuff, computers help the process, but a human still has to be the person making certain decisions. What they're talking about, though, is some of these jobs, just like automated trucks, self-driving trucks, right? Like, so the minute you start, if that's ever successful, now you're going to reduce accidents. Yeah. You don't have to have the sleep time, the whole bit. So,
and then I found this interesting. They said President Nixon advocated this in 1969. They were talking about the universal basic income, which to me sounds very socialist. It sounds like France or some of these Eastern or Western European countries. So the author, quote, believes that this could be helped in the United States because we're the richest country of the 200 countries that are the wealthiest. We are the richest and by far have the largest income disparity, which I thought was odd. I didn't think we were.
Oh, it's huge. It's huge. Yeah.
Meaning 1% owns a big chunk of the wealth. So this universal basic income concept means that everybody, every household would get some sort of stipend, I guess, similar to Social Security.
And similar to the experiment they tried in, was it Sweden? Which didn't go so well.
I'm all for it.
I'll take my check.
No, sure. Rather than us dumping millions of dollars to Egypt or the Palestinian Authority or Israel, give me the $21,000 a year. I'll take it.
It's true.
Don't you agree?
Yeah, I'd take it. The guys in the booth
agree.
The boys agree.
All
right. Next story.
Next story was, and you and I have talked about this a lot. How gay should the gay bar be?
Yeah.
And they used the example here to start off the article with the Abbey.
Los Angeles,
which is a famous gay bar. And they're talking
where
about...
I used my last $2 bill.
Use your last $2 bill. And so the gist of the story was they started talking to the owner there, and some of the older gay clientele have been complaining about the amount of straight people now that are visiting gay bars. And the owner's argument was, we've been fighting for equality for all these years. We can't reverse discriminate and say, you're straight, you can't come in. And so there's lots of discussion from the younger LGBT people versus some of the older folks as to what is the purpose of a gay bar, or is there a purpose for a gay bar?
So the article weaves a common thread for a lot of bars, which is a lot of straight women use a gay bar as a site for bachelorette parties. Now, the last time you and I were in Provincetown on one of our VW road trips, I think we had the Jetta, we heard from some of the owners of the clubs that it's one of the more disruptive and not necessarily welcome things when the bachelorette parties.
They're bringing buses in from Boston with bachelorette parties for the weekend at the gay bars.
And I don't, a lot of gay men are like, we're not your accessory. It's not.
Oh, but you're fun. You're fun. You're fun.
It's a safe space, the whole bit. The article even talks about, how some women will go on a Tinder date or a first date at a gay bar, to make sure that there's no distractions.
You're looking at me.
And B, to make sure that the guy is down with her agenda, which is gays are fine. I'm okay.
I thought that was interesting.
I like that one.
I'm glad you pulled that out, because that was my one takeaway as well. And they also said that as people are younger and there's sexual fluidity, is more acceptable. That, why not have is it necessary to have a place that's just gay or just exclusively gay?
But from a bar point, and the article also balanced this idea of the space, what it means to have a gay bar, what it means to go to it, against the economic backdrop of, can you successfully have a gay bar in today's world with apps like Grindr and Scruff and all the websites, which is taking the place of how people connect and meet. And it's true. I mean, that's a truism, right? It used to be the only place you could meet other people would be going to a bar, and there's a whole thing about that.
The one stat, they said about 15 bars per year nationwide close.
The
other one that shocked me was they said there's not a single bar exclusive to gay women in either San Francisco or Los Angeles.
Yeah, I was surprised by that.
I was really surprised by that. So it's, I guess it's an ongoing, I miss the days of the fun old gay bar, but I guess I don't go out to bars anyway.
Well, we're not.
Do you anymore?
Well, that was a rite of passage.
Yeah.
And I'm dating myself by saying this, but when I was in my 20s, that was definitely the rite of passage. And knowing what bar you were going to go to, meeting your friends. And nowadays, I have a friend named Alex. He and his partner Tyler have these little viewing parties for RuPaul's Drag Race. Well, we did the same thing. We just did it at a bar, and it was usually watching Dynasty. And if Crystal and Alexis had a cat fight, then the whole bar was like screaming and laughing. But the thing I miss about the bars was it was all types of people. Wall Streeters, marketing types. So it was everybody and it was a great mixing thing.
A little secret decoder ring. You got to go in there.
That was part of being gay, was hiding hiding your identity and then revealing it at a gay bar, I suppose, right?
Yeah, so the days are gone, people.
Well, one guy, before we conclude that one guy, Mr. McKenzie, interviewed for the article, said the gay world used to be freaks and geeks. Now the edginess is all gone. Now the edginess is gone. I don't know if I like freaks and geeks, but I did like the edginess part.
Now, what was the third story, Mr. Nash?
Short piece. People aged over 40 perform best with a 3-day working week. Now, I can completely agree with this. So the simple study was done in Melbourne.
Is he going to add a day?
Yeah, one ad, done. Basically, they looked at a 25-hour work week for people over 40, and they found that from a cognitive point of view, it's the most productive for this group. The minute you began, and by extension, they also found in some of their research that sometimes a longer work week does not necessarily mean a more productive week for anybody, period. But in this case, for the over 40 worker, 25 hours seemed to be the golden number for getting the best work out of them.
I laughed about this because I think not certainly a factory job or an assembly job where you have to be alert and on ball all the time and put in your 8 hours or whatever, or you're working at a checkout line or something. But I thought a lot of white-collar jobs,
they're already
you got 25 hours out of somebody, you're lucky.
I was thinking the same thing because you and I know.
Come in, you BS for a little while. You read whatever you're going to do. You
Marsha brought in brownies. They're in the kitchen.
Right, then there's a little birthday celebration, or you go to a meeting.
Oh, you read my mind. And I can't tell you how many hours friends of mine spend per week sitting in meetings. And if it's 10 or 15, then they're only working 25, right? So.
Lots of groupthink. Yeah. And I used to tell you this. You would call sometimes, and I would get most of my work done after 5 when everybody went home.
Or before
early in the morning, because usually during the day, there's so much interruption and so much else going on that I laughed. It's not like somebody is sitting in an office, all day long.
Well, think about this.
Grindstone.
Tim Cook, who's the head of Apple, gets up at 3 or 3:30 in the morning. He exercises, he answers specific emails, he prepares for the day, and the day starts at maybe 7 something.
Why is he getting up so early?
Because he can't get his work done without it. Because the minute he appears on the Apple campus, his time is taken up by FaceTime.
Can you do this?
Can you do this? Can you speak to this? Can you do this? So, like you said, he either gets it done in the morning or at night, but the work day itself is all about being seen, chatting.
Guidance counselor.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. So we've got, so those are 3 quick stories. We've got 2 more when we come back. One of them is a heartwarming story about the introduction of Franklin into the Peanuts comics. Isn't it heartwarming?
It is a heartwarming.
There's one about shoes made out of plastic bottles that John's interested in. So We'll take a quick break.
So Tim did the heartwarming story, and John did that ridiculous toss away about making shoes out of
I looked at that
balls.
thing. Anyway, I'll pull that story apart when we get there. Stay with us. We'll be right back after this quick break.
Brought to you by Volkswagen. Visit VW.com to learn more. Focus on the savvy side of 9 to 5 with the Focus Group.
Been in business a week. I got more money than I know what to do with.
Listen, laugh, and learn with Tim and John.
Herrera Rocher. He is doing well.
Order together.
Welcome back to the Focus Group. John Nash with Tim Bennett, the heartwarming part of the duo. He's going to bring you some love and special thoughts.
I have emotion.
Unlike me, I'm just obsessed with water bottles being turned into shoes. All right. Tim did find this story. It is heartwarming. It's a smart and good story, and it involves the Peanuts and Charles Shultz, who created them. So, Tim, take it away.
Well, we were going to do this on Unbuttoned. And then, of course, some of the big newscasts, if you watch them, they've stole the story from us as well. But
it's right under our story's stolen.
Remember, Morning Joe used to take our music. Yeah. So John and I would play music and topics on Saturday, and Monday morning, the producer,
there was
whoever
definitely
watched,
someone who listened.
Same music, same correlation, talk birthdays, whatever. Well, so anyway, so somebody took our peanut story, I think. But anyway, the headline is Franklin integrated peanuts 47 years ago today. So this was last week, end of July. And here's how a teacher changed history. So they talk about how the Peanuts comic strip was such a huge presence, particularly in the 60s. But as we all know, the turmoil that was going on in the U.S. from racial discrimination and the Vietnam War and all the other social strife of integrating schools and busing, that there was a school teacher in California that thought that it would be an interesting idea if some of these comic strips integrated and showed white kids and black kids together
in school,
or kids of color together. And so she wrote to a few of them and got nice letters back, she said, and some of the letters said, we like the idea, we like the concept, but not sure either
they were afraid.
Our syndicators will appreciate it. They were afraid of what might happen. And then when she went back at Shultz for Peanuts, and he wrote back and said the same thing, I like the idea, not sure. I don't want to come across as condescending or
correct.
So,
or high-handed.
Right. So she ended up talking to a couple of African-American parents that she knew, and then they had sent letters specifically to Charles Shultz. And lo and behold, this character Franklin was introduced.
Mm-hmm.
And
so Franklin, the character, is the son of a father who's off in Vietnam.
Right.
And he's the new regular kid at the beach. And the storyline that back then was set in July of 1968. Sparky is Charles Schultz's nickname. So the quote goes, in response to him introducing Franklin, United Features, who syndicated his comic strip, here's a little thing that happened. Sparky faced a question from the head of United Features Syndicate, who said, "Are you sure you want to do this?" If you know Sparky, the teacher, she said, you know what his response was. And either way, he said, either you run it the way I drew it or I quit. And Peanuts was the most popular daily strip or whatever running, and the Sunday was always in color, right? Yep. And
they obviously don't want to lose it.
No, and so Schultz, because of that power, was able to introduce Franklin successfully, and he became one of the most loved characters.
The teacher was Harriet Glickman.
Yeah.
And I thought it was great because, again, it shows one person. And when you think about it now, it seems so simple, right? With a simple idea. So she had said it was just the assassination of Martin Luther King had happened. Again, knowing all the turmoil we had going in the 60s and school busing and integration, came up with this thought, and I thought it was just
don't
brilliant.
Forget some of the pushback, though. Charles Schultz received some messages from the South, from editors, saying, and these are the newspapers that ran the strip, please don't send us any more strips with black children in the classroom with white children. We're going through forced integration in our schools, and I don't want to see any more of these strips.
You know my comment I put.
Well, you know, but think about it. This is not that long ago. I mean,
you know, the comment was on my side.
What did you write?
Why did we let them rejoin the Union in the 1800s?
That's always your thing.
There's a reason we had a civil war, and they're still fighting it.
And here's another one. Shultz was famous, of course, for doubling down if you told him that something couldn't be done. Several years earlier, he'd included Bible passages in TV's A Charlie Brown Christmas after being challenged on Linus's monologue from the book of Luke. So naturally, Franklin was now a fixture. So So Charles Shultz, you tell him not to do something, he's going to make sure he does it.
Hey, it reminds me of a very quick story that I think we've told before, but I worked on one of the commercials. The very first time we cast a full African-American couple in a Subaru commercial.
You had some interesting commentary,
the launch of a car,
right?
And it was not far off from some of the comments from the South about, what do you think you're doing? How are the dealers going to accept this? You're going to ruin the brand.
And what year was this, 1990?
This was 2000-something. And I remember, and I still remember, my mouth dropped open, the agency's mouth dropped open, the other advertising person with me. And, you know, how did you do this? I said, we had a casting call, and they were the best couple and had the best chemistry. That's what advertising's about.
There, it's how it works.
And I will say to one of the senior executives' credit, he did go home and talk to his family, and the next morning decided to run with it, but was petrified.
Yeah, folks, I got
Not that long ago.
No, and you and I have often said that if people really knew what was said on some of those C-suite floors, the C-suite is always the CEO, the CFO, the CMO, you know, the guys around the company, you'd be shocked. You'd actually be shocked because you think just...
No, I told a very clean version.
Oh, sure you did. I know the story.
It got down to...
I remember when you called me. You're like, you're gonna love this one, and you'd be, and again, early 2000s, you'd have that conversation, right?
You could hear it a pin drop in California with the production company. Like, are we having this conversation?
Yep, you are having it.
You go recast that commercial. Okay.
Yeah. No, look, towards the end of the LGBT campaign at Subaru, I had some unusual phone calls, I'll just put it that way. Some that I couldn't, I'm rarely rendered speechless. My mom would tell you that too. There's very few times when I can't come up with something or say something, but there'd be times where I'd hold the phone and I'd be like, what did I can't even process this. Like, where'd this come from? Yeah. Anyway.
What happened?
Our last article is a really quick one. It's something I came across in Business Insider. The concept intrigued me. And it's eco-friendly footwear, and basically it's a company called Vivo Barefoot, V-I-V-O Barefoot, vivobarefoot.com, a line of shoes made from recycled water bottles. Each pair of shoes uses approximately 17 recycled bottles. And the deal here is these Vivo Barefoot shoes are part of that class of shoe that the virtues are that there's no structured heel or arch support, but it's designed to let your foot naturally interact with the ground the way our foot was evolved to do so. I'm wearing a pair actually of sneakers called Minimus that does this. Tim's going to look over. These are Minimus. And
any support?
No, and ever since I started walking, using these shoes more for walking and for the gym and for exercise, I've had no foot problems.
They made out of plastic bottles?
These are not made out of 17 plastic bottles. But it's an interesting thing, and apparently it's taken off, and they use... They recycle PETs and other forms of plastics. I went to the site actually, and there, if you're watching on video, we have some of the shoes up there. I clicked on a few that I actually liked, and it took me a second before I realized that all of them are out of stock.
Which one there do you like of those 6?
I didn't like any of these, by the way.
No. I was going to say these are a little...
I saw someone wearing that orange soled thing, and it took me a second to recognize the logo, but there's actually the picture that John has with the water bottle up there now. The front of that shoe is not a bad looking shoe. It's this suede color thing.
See, I think the knobbies are a little bit aggressive. Yeah. On the black and orange shoe, don't you?
The knobbies?
The grips.
Oh, that one. No, I don't like that. But the other one, is a casual.
The thing that I took away from this, it says a water bottle would take 400 years to decompose in a landfill.
Bingo. Yeah.
And that in 2017, humans collectively bought 1 million plastic water bottles every minute. That's outrageous.
Yeah.
So, but the fact I said that it takes 400 years to decompose, why don't they do something with asphalt and fill in potholes?
Permanent roads that don't destroy themselves yet.
If you filled potholes in, then they would last forever, the road, wouldn't it?
Well, I would just check out Vivo Barefoot. It's an interesting...
It's ignoring me.
Well, because I don't think it works that way. Asphalt's different than plastic. So.
Well, you're making a shoe. You're making yarn out of it or something, right?
Yeah,
why can't you spin it and make it?
That's multiple temperatures. It has to go to below 0 to 100 and some degrees.
It's an opportunity.
I'll get our labs working on it. I'll get the focus group lab. Tim wants bottles to go into roads.
Boys, give us your shoe size. We're all going to get these plastic bottle shoes.
11.
Are you 11? John, what are you?
I don't know, at 9.
9. Well, you don't seem too positive, or you don't seem too.
Garrett, I'm 11 too, and I'm going to try to order a pair of these. I'm curious. They range in price from like $90 to $190. Oh, and one last caveat to mention for those frequent travelers: that apparently the shoe can roll up into the size of a pair of socks. That's useful. That's useful.
They sound stinky.
You should wait. Hold the mug up. They sound stinky. The teaching mug's got to come up when you do that. If you want to go to the moon in a second, I guess you're a good lover. That goes all the way back to that one.
Another guestless show. Thanks for joining us. Happy birthday to our friend John through Deep Discount. He's 70 today. John, this is a new 50.
Good mark to hit.
Be sure to head over to focusgroupradio.com and click on the little shark logo. Arr! Start shopping away. Get additional 15% off your order, off of already great prices.
With FG15.
With FG15, which will be posted on our Facebook page, which is Focus Group Radio. Thank you, John. Thank you, Garrett. Thank you, John. Thanks to our friends at Volkswagen. Be sure to head over to VW.com and check out all the great cars Volkswagen has. There's John and I are planning a road trip. We're still waiting for final approval, but we hope that it's going to be soon, and it's going to be a fun trip.
It marries our love of tasting and sampling certain foods with driving a certain kind of car.
And in one of the popular areas where our listeners are, so maybe you can meet us along the way, which would be kind of fun. But if it happens, it's going to happen quick, so we're going to have to figure out what's going on. So that's it. Be sure to follow, or be sure to tune in on Tuesdays for TFG Unbuttoned. You can, again, find all our platforms at focusgroupradio.com. Don't text and drive. Arrive alive. Have a good week.
It's the Focus Group with Tim Bennett and John Nash. Formerly on Sirius XM Satellite Radio and now accessible on all platforms. Subscribe, like, and rate us on your platform of choice. Learn more at focusgroupradio.com.
That was a stunning focus group.